How you doing there, Darren?
Doing well, Paul.
It'd be a
Good
nice
week.
balmy Monday morning for you, right?
Oh yeah, it's like right around 0 degrees Celsius today. Beautiful.
Nice, nice. That's
Yeah.
that's what a good 25, 30 degrees Celsius more than you were last week, eh?
Yeah, it's like, pop on the swimming trunks and hang out on the deck, sort of weather
Yeah,
in Canada. Yeah.
that's so that is what I remember about Canadians is that their tolerance to cold is insane. That people are melting when it's 15 degrees in the positive and whinging that it's too hot and for me
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
I'm I'm still in my Bavarian outfit,
Yeah, we're almost t-shirt short weather here, almost.
right?
Almost. Yeah.
So
So, last week we talked about a couple of things. We want to pick up there first.
let's do it. Let's do it. I was wondering what was on your radar, given your concerns about the lack of response in Alberta to the COVID-19 threat. I was wondering if there's been any development since then.
Well, it's funny you should ask because last week when we talked about this on Sunday. Okay, first of all, just so everybody knows, I am a teacher, and I was a little baffled that the government was just keeping on, and leaving schools open, and seemed to be just playing with fire. And literally, we finished recording on that Sunday,
Right.
and the announcement came out probably about 2 hours later that they were closing all the schools and we would be working remotely. Um, to my relief,
Yeah,
a
sure.
lot of it's interesting though, as a teacher, a lot of people were like, oh, now teachers are on holidays for 3 months. It's like no, we still have to teach. That's the tricky thing, right? Is now we're going to have to teach remotely, right? Another comment was, oh great, like what are we going to do with our kids? It's like we've got the same problem, like we also
Yeah,
have
yeah.
kids.
Teachers do have children from time to time.
Right?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So it's not a ideal scenario, but I feel like it is the right move. So I'm happy that they made that move. I just see the spread could get a lot worse if they didn't do that. So I was happy about that.
So that's the
But so
provincial
yeah,
government, right?
correct. And pretty much across the country now,
Okay.
schools are closed. I mentioned British Columbia too hadn't closed, but that reason was they were on their spring break at that time. So they
Uh,
hadn't announced anything yet. But even so, like the other thing about that I wondered was, okay, why didn't they get on this quicker just so people could have a little more preparation with, babysitting or whatever,
yeah,
right?
yeah. If you expect it's a good chance that you will close, why not announce it now?
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let
But it
everyone.
seems like they're doing the right thing. I mean, honestly, if you look at Alberta for testing of COVID, it actually leads all of North America. They have the most tests being performed in the entire continent,
Really?
amazingly. Yeah. Like okay, put it this
Per,
way.
per capita or
Alberta, I told you this, no, no. Alberta, population of 4 million people, okay?
yeah.
So far, we've had somewhere just under 30,000 tests done, 27,000 or something like this. It was the last I saw. The state of New York, about 20 million people, so 5 times our population, they've had about 30,000 tests. 34,000?
Wow. So you are miles ahead.
Yeah, which is crazy, right? There's a lot of cases in cities south of us, Calgary, which is more of an international airport city.
Right.
The city I live in, the numbers are not as bad because there aren't as many travelers. So,
But you got that big mall, man. People aren't coming to that the mall of what is it called? The Great White Mall of.
the Great White Mall, I like that. That's what they should call it. It's
You know
West
the one, right?
Edmonton Mall. West
West
Edmonton.
Edmonton Mall.
Yeah.
What's it? It has a
West
claim to
Edmonton
fame.
Mall, Wayne Gretzky, that's basically what people know
That's
about
what we right. Okay.
Yeah.
What's the thing about West Edmonton? It's the biggest, or what? There's something about it, right?
For the longest time, it was the largest mall in the world, and it has
Uh,
a number of things in the mall that are the largest of their kind. So, for example, it has an indoor amusement park, with roller coasters and so forth. It has an indoor water park,
uh-huh.
which is a full-scale water park. I mean, it's just covered because it's minus 30 here in the winter. So, if you want to go to a water park, it has to be indoors or you'd die.
Right.
Yeah.
And the water
So
wouldn't be flowing all that well, I would imagine.
it wouldn't be great for swimming.
Yeah,
No.
yeah. Oh, cool.
So
Okay.
no, it's just a very large mall. Yeah, I know there's a couple in the world now that are a little bigger. I think there's one in Minnesota. I think it's called the Great White Mall. No, I'm just kidding. It's some big mall, and I think there's one in like Dubai or something like that. That's big.
Okay. So you surfed a little bit, but you still have I guess it's probably fairly empty by now.
Oh yeah, yeah. Like I know people who worked at the mall, and they've been laid off. A lot of them.
Ouch, ouch. So have
Yeah.
you has Alberta or Canada shut non-essentials?
Pretty
I know they
much,
shut.
yeah, yeah, they have. So, if you want to get food from a restaurant, you can't sit down in the restaurant anymore. You have to like order takeout or skip the dishes or whatever.
Probably
Grocery stores are
changes the
open, but
yeah.
most other stuff is closed.
Oh
Yeah.
well,
You guys
so
still in
the
that state there?
yeah. We're still we got another couple of weeks to go. It's spring break now, and then there's another week. We expect that would be extended to the end of April.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, it just seems to be. I think the idea is to place a big firewall up ahead of until it gets a little warmer, and while you're on top, why not make sure you stay on top, kind of thing.
Yeah.
There was some lesson recently that there was floating around Korea, which means people are thinking about it, about taking some situation in the past where they took the foot off the pedal too soon.
Okay.
Their initial response was great. Then they let, things looked in control. They relaxed, and then it just came back. I think it may have been a
Oh,
Spanish
really?
flu, but yeah. So that's
I
kind
see.
of that's memeing in Korea at the moment. So I think there's the understanding that we'll carry on for till the end of April or something.
Just to be safe.
Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
and you're gonna. We're not actually shut down. I mean, it's just schools.
Right.
No one's
Yeah.
going out. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's all good. It
Yeah.
is what it is.
I've been going for a lot of walks because, it gets boring in the house, right?
Yeah. How's
Yeah.
it going working? So you got kids studying at home and you working at home. It's
Yeah.
be a
It's
bit
very
cozy, yeah?
strange. Yeah, it's weird. Right now I'm kind of getting everything converted over so that I can teach stuff remotely. But of course, you can't expect the students to perform the same amount of quantity of learning as they
Yeah.
would in a classroom. So we're kind of looking at just kind of establishing some sort of normalcy for them, some kind of routine, but it's going to be a lot lighter on the workload. There's no way we're going to cover all the curriculum that we're meant to cover normally.
Yeah.
But just I think it'd be good for their mental health to be still learning and still connected. So it's more about that,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it looks like they've made some good moves. Yeah. The other funny thing that I noticed that I talked about last week Sunday that totally changed, like within hours of me mentioning it, was the Bitcoin hash rate.
Oh yeah. You
'Cause
were saying that it hadn't dropped.
I was saying how, if you look if you just Google BTC hash rate, you get a bunch of examples. Blockchain.com is the first one that shows up. And I was saying how I couldn't believe through all of this COVID stuff in China that the hash rate just kept on climbing. I mean, it steadied a little bit in the fall, but it's been climbing steadily. And literally the day after I said that, it fell, and it fell hard. Like it fell, people were kind of panicked about it. And now when I look, it's fallen basically back down to the levels that it was at in January, and it's recovering. It's already started to recover. It's back up to close to the average over the last few months. Now, chances are it'll fluctuate down again a little bit, but looks
So
like it
that
hit
was a
a point.
1 week drop.
Yeah, close to 1 week. You're right. Yeah, 6, 7 days. Yeah, you're right.
And for anybody wondering why that's significant, what's the implications of that?
Well, to put it simply, if you are investing in hardware and electricity to mine Bitcoin, you need it to be profitable,
Mhm.
right? And so if you're putting out all these miners and
Wait a minute. Wait, they're not doing this out of the goodness of their hearts? Bitcoin miners in China? Sure.
maybe some are. I don't know. I always no. I don't. I don't mind Bitcoin. But So they've got all these machines going, and you know how it is. You've seen these huge warehouses full of Bitcoin miners, and they're always upgrading these things to be as efficient as possible and to use as little electricity as possible. And the difficulty has just been going up, up, up because the hash rate goes up, and so when the hash rate goes up, the difficulty goes up. And I'm not sure. I didn't check. There should have been a difficulty adjustment, actually, now that I think about it. Perhaps that's why the hash rate's bouncing back up again. I'd have to look. But anyway, it was climbing, took a fall, and now it's climbing again. So it's quite possible that the difficulty adjustment has done the trick, because when the hash rate gets weakened, the Bitcoin blockchain will ease up the difficulty, and then people hop back on board because it's profitable again. So
right. I love the beautiful simplicity of this, the equilibrium that Bitcoin manages to find with the hash rate adjusting and block rewards and the whole kind of it all.
It's genius. It's genius.
It's great.
Yeah, it's the first thing that really drew me into Bitcoin was just the simplicity of its, gamification of greed, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But I don't know, can greed have good connotations? In a free market, I guess it could. The point being, people are motivated for their own self benefit to benefit others, right?
Yeah. Well, in many ways, that's kind of the truest form of capitalism, where a bunch of individuals are all self-motivated by their own self-interest, and good things happen because of that. The guy who's good at
sounds better than greed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah, and everyone does things, and the efficiency thing, right? You don't do things that you're less good at than somebody else. You manufacture clothes in Vietnam, not in the West, because we don't do it as efficient. We're using resources as efficiently as possible. I think it's Bitcoin encapsulates that whole spirit really well, I find.
Yes, yeah. So what's been on your radar?
My radar. Well, I was actually interested in what the you may have seen that Tezos decided to settle a class action lawsuit that had been going on since its launch, essentially. So a bunch of token holders were arguing that it sold securities, and those sales were unregistered, unlicensed, and this lawsuit has been going on for a couple of years, and they just decided that the benefits of settling without admitting guilt outweighed the cost and expense and time that went into continuing fighting the lawsuit. And what I was kind of wondering is because Ripple Labs, as you know, possibly is in exactly the same situation. Their class action lawsuit claimed of illegally selling securities. And, as a couple of weeks ago, a judge kicked out one of their claims of, I can't remember what their argument was, but it wasn't a substantive argument, it was a procedural argument. So what I'm wondering is, does Ripple Labs bite the bullet and settle their own lawsuit? Well,
don't you think it just makes sense to just do that? Because isn't the cost of settling quite low comparatively to what these guys are making?
Yeah, absolutely. You wouldn't settle for a prohibitive cost. That's what settling is for, right? It's to get it out of the way. You're not admitting guilt. Everyone's signed on to, keeping you can make the terms of the settlement not, private. No one can talk about it. No one's guilty. No one's it just brushes it aside and let's move on. Let's jump into the future without this nagging thing on our tail. And I wonder, it would make sense to me if Ripple decided to do the same thing.
Right, and they can just continue dumping their XRP on their fans.
Woo!
Sorry, guys, we got to pay for the legal fees. We're dumping another billion.
Yes, we got to. Yes, it's not like there's no shortage of 25-cent tokens that they've got under their belt to get this thing out of the way.
They hold something like 60 billion of the XRP or something like that in their escrow. Isn't that what it is?
Yeah, I don't know the exact figures actually, but it's a massive amount.
Yes, it's like 60% of something.
Yeah, and they recently admitted that dumping XRP was part of their business, part of the way they stay afloat, right?
Hey, if you could just settle out of court
Right.
for a small fee and then just dump to cover it, sounds like a pretty good business model.
Yeah, because I mean, EOS settled with, and that was with the SEC. That was in class action suit. Wisely, I think, because they had a $4 billion war chest, and that cost what, 30 something million dollars was the fine they paid. Kick
Okay.
is being dragged through the courts by the
Mm-hmm.
SEC, and they're choosing to fight it. Um, EOS is going to survive despite settling with the SEC. Kick refused to settle, and for
Yeah, they kind of dug their heels in more, didn't they?
yeah, launched a fund to fight the SEC, and I mean, it's crazy. So what
Okay.
else is on your radar, Darren? I hear that you're working hard on a couple of interviews for your
Yeah,
colleagues.
I had some really interesting ones. The last one I had was with Ron Resnick of the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. I think last week I accidentally said the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance, which to me sounds better.
What is it?
But
Say the first
it's
name in
the
the.
Enterprise Ethereum Alliance is the correct order.
Okay, Enterprise.
Personally, I feel like Ethereum Enterprise Alliance sounds better. But
Yeah, it makes some more sense. Yeah.
yeah,
You're
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Did you
But they're
tell
the
him that?
enterprise. I didn't. I noticed when I listened to the podcast afterwards because I wanted to see, how it was. I noticed afterwards, oh, wait a second, I said it in the wrong order, which to me, it's a better order, though. I don't know.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree. I would have told him.
so anyway, so he is the executive director of the EEA. I'll just say EEA. That way I
That's
can't get it
the
mixed up.
acronym. Yeah.
Um, and it was interesting because right at the beginning of the interview, he says to me, you should know this. I'm leaving the EEA. No one knows this yet, other
Oh,
than the EEA, other than the people who on the board that he had sent in his resignation. So it was breaking news that he was leaving the EEA. So I couldn't mention that on Sunday when I talked to you. So anyway, he's leaving the EEA. Just for a little background on the guy, this is what an incredible what would it be called? A curriculum vitae, I guess you call it, a CV. He started off years ago. He's super into music, and so he was first into like music and a music shop in Santa Barbara in California and that kind of lifestyle. But I think he soon realized there's not a lot of money in this, so he went into software and hardware work because he was always a computer nut, and even before computers, he was into just electrical engineering and stuff like that, right? But he was the guy who basically headed up the standardization of the 4G network globally. Okay, so he managed to coordinate all of these competing forces, Huawei, Motorola, ZTE, Samsung. He got all these guys on board with the same technology, the same infrastructure. And the trouble was that 4G was actually a little bit ahead of its time because 3G was just ramping up at that time. Now, I don't know if you remember 3G, but basically it promised the idea of being able to stream music, it promised the idea of being able to stream video, but it sucked. It didn't work well. And so he kind of pushed for moving forward to 4G because the tech actually did work. So he had to get all these competing parties to kind of agree on the same standard. And nowadays, of course, you can take your phone and go to anywhere in the world, pop in a SIM card, and it will work. Well, that's because of the work he was doing with WiMAX, with the 4G and LTE and all that stuff. But from there, he went on to other jobs. He worked wireless charging and got that standardized around the world. Was kind of a cool thing he was talking about with that was, with a Tesla, how you plug it in. He was saying how there's a lot of companies working on wireless mats where literally you just park on the mat and it charges your car. But then anyways, from there, he goes into working with the EEA, and they kind of asked him to head up kind of a standardization procedure with the EEA and getting Ethereum kind of so that there was kind of standard wording and standard ideas in terms of the technology and creating standards for different tokens, like ERC20 or whatever, that kind of stuff.
Right.
Right. And so that was a lot of his work. But then anyway, he's moving on from that now. He's going on to work with a token taxonomy consortium. And basically the idea being, yeah, there you go. I'm pretty sure the order I got right this time. I don't think it's taxonomy token. But anyway, with that, he's working on basically going beyond just Ethereum, but getting any token on any blockchain to be kind of part of a single language and a single way of understanding it, and kind of categorizing everything so they're easier to compare tokens regardless of the blockchain, and kind of get a nomenclature going there. Basically making it so you can compare them more easily between each other, and that there's standards of measurement between them, and that you could have certain metrics for measuring their performance against each other. And so some companies aren't too eager to do that because they make pretty wild claims, and they might
I can't imagine which ones you're talking about, but yeah.
So he says some are not too keen on the concept, but
right.
He says for adoption to happen, there has to be some kind of standardization in order for people to have a better understanding of it and a willingness to work with it. Tell me about something else going on with you these days. What's on your radar lately?
As well as the coronavirus, that's what we seem to be calling it. I guess COVID-19 lost the meme wars, and we're now calling it the coronavirus for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
With the coronavirus, the Trump administration,
I think it should just be called the vid. The vid. I mean, it's the one everyone's talking about, right?
That's kind of cool. Yeah, that's kind of cool. That works. I'll go with that, man. We can call. So the vid has wreaked absolute havocs on markets and people, and everyone's locked down right now, more or less, right? The whole world. And the Trump administration announced a bunch of, let's just throw a whole bunch of money at airlines, hotels, and stuff, as well as writing checks to average Americans.
They promised they won't use them for buybacks this time. We promise.
That's right. We actually we did a little bit of work on so this 2017 Trump tax cuts, which all went to corporations. 70% or something of that $1 trillion went on share buybacks.
Yes. Which are now worthless, by the way.
And now they've lost all that value.
So had they instead, put that into investing in their, say, R&D, or in their working conditions, or in their productivity, actually producing something,
making something,
their fundamentals would be way ahead of where they are. But instead, their fundamentals are in the same place they were years ago, and their stocks are now worth what they were worth years ago, which seems appropriate.
Yep. Well, I mean, the moral hazard that you play with when there's free money being thrown at you, it's quite alarming. And I think I remember us talking about this, and I raised concerns that we've had 12 years of quantitative easing, call it quantitative easing or not. It's been 12 years of it, when maybe the first 2 years were justified and justifiable in light of Goldman Sachs, Lehman Brothers. 12 years of it leaves central bankers, and interest rates in Sweden were negative. In Europe, and much of Europe has been negative. About 6 months ago, the Swedes came to the conclusion that I don't think we can keep going on with this negative interest rate situation, because if something bad happens, what are we going to do then? We're out of levers to pull. So they started raising. I mean, I think they may have got them to 1%, and then bang, the vid strikes back, and everything shut down. So I don't know, man. I could, I'm hoping that this doesn't happen, but you can just see the most hideous levels of inflation hitting everywhere. Complete debasement of fiat money and all that sort of stuff. I wonder if it does say something positive about the short-term, at least, future of cryptocurrencies, right? You would have to imagine that this stuff can only be good for if it moves one way or another, it can only be positive for the value of the value.
Well, those of us who are in crypto, we like instant gratification, right? We don't like things to be kind of a longer term thing, but in this situation, it is a longer term thing, because quantitative easing and printing of money, there's a lag there between the printing of the money
Yeah.
and the value of the assets. And it kind of comes back to, I don't know, you know the term Cantillon effect, right? Max Kaiser talks about the Cantillon effect a lot. You
Oh,
know Max
I've not heard of
Kaiser?
it.
Okay, it's the
Yeah.
notion that I don't want to get too deep into this, but the idea that when the money is first printed, those at the very top, those very,
Yeah.
very elite, wealthiest people, they're the first ones who have access to it at no cost, right? There's no interest cost to them to have access to that money, at which point they can go forward and purchase assets. They can go forward and purchase real estate. They can buy gold. They can buy silver. They can buy whatever, right? But
Pricing
the
everybody else out of the
average
market.
person doesn't get access to the benefits of that money until it's flowed down to them, at which point everything's already more expensive.
Right. I've heard, yes, I'm familiar with that work now. Now that
Right.
he's described it. Yeah, and quite frightening. I mean, the fact that that's already happened. Is there data on the fact, did that happen? Did that effect occur
Well,
after
I mean, I
08?
guess it's theoretical, but I mean, if you look back over the past couple of decades, it's pretty evident that that's what's been happening, right? I mean, the ultimate fear being that you basically return to a system that's not far off from feudalism, where you have nobility of sorts that are the
Yeah, no,
landowners,
yeah.
and everyone else is kind of just a renter and a wage slave, right? You know,
Yeah.
and it does seem to be happening if you look around the world, you know, and even people like Christine Lagarde of the IMF is like, well, would you rather have no jobs or, you know, have a job and be able to survive? You know, investment maybe just isn't going to happen for a lot of people, right? That was basically her conclusion was, well, sorry, you're just not going to be able to invest. You're just going to have to work. You should be happy.
That's
You
a
can buy
disgrace.
food, right?
That's a disgrace. You know, the Obama administration was handing out properties to investors, to LLCs, after all the houses came on the market. People were running away from mortgages, and the government
Mm-hmm.
purchased the mortgages. It sold them in lots of thousands to the highest bidder, right?
Lots of thousands.
Yes. So who would offer? Mnuchin was one of the owns a number of companies that bought
Right.
blocks of these housing units. So cities like Detroit, which were majority owner occupied cities, are now majority renter occupied cities, and everyone's renting off of nameless, faceless LLCs. They don't even know who the landlord is anymore. But
So
it's
they're
turned,
serfs. They're basically serfs.
yeah, yeah, and that's, I mean, that's the Obama administration. This time
Right.
around, we have it could be even worse. But I think it's disgusting. It's ugly. And I mean, the government, yeah, sure, you're going to create that problem, but then you fix it, right? You intervene and create that kind of problem of renters and yeah. But here we are, man.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, it comes to the problem of the people who are in charge. It's to their benefit for it to remain this way. So there's not much reason for them to change. Not only that, but they operate in 4-year terms. And so the politicians aren't necessarily particularly interested in fixing a long-term problem.
Long-term problem. Yeah.
Right? You know, they're often, not all of them, but many of them are more concerned with, you know, some arrangement they've made with some board somewhere to get a particular law passed through, and then they get their position on the board after their time in service. You know, I'm not saying that's true for all of them, but there certainly are those that's true for.
Yeah.
So what about this Art Week coming up? What's on your radar for that?
Art Week, yeah, we're writing a really exciting piece on what impact blockchain will have on the creative process in art, given that blockchain is our first best chance to make art permanent.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a fairly deeply philosophical piece, and I've got some great insights from numbers of different art. We got theater practitioners and some fine artists and some filmmakers. So yeah, should be good. I'm looking forward to seeing it published and seeing how the whole thing goes. But it is quite a heavy philosophical piece, you know.
Yeah, cool. I've got a piece about an artist from he was working with Super Rare, the platform Super Rare, and the artist's name is Robness. It's an interesting story. He basically had a piece on Super Rare that was pulled over copyright issues. And so I interviewed him about that. But it kind of harkens back to, the whole pop art idea of taking, everyday objects and saying this is art, right? Like, or making art from those objects and kind of bringing that into the cryptocurrency world, into the digital realm. So
is his art like pop art? Is he a pop artist?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess you could call it
It's
cyber
digital.
pop. I don't know if that's an official term for it, but yeah.
Oh,
So no,
cool.
it was an interesting talk. I don't want to give away too much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another artist I'm speaking with this week is Josie Bellini. Probably her most famous piece is called Filter, I think, and it has a picture of her with it's like a gas mask, but it has Bitcoin on the filters, and then it's cash in the background.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll be talking with her as well. So yeah, some really interesting people. It actually makes me feel like trying some of that stuff, but I don't know. I'll see.
Yeah. There's some cool stuff going on.
Yeah. I did study art a lot in university, so it's something that I'm interested in, but I've just gotten into writing instead. So.
Well, that's an art, writing's an art.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Anyway, hopefully we're turning a corner here and see where it goes. I suspect, when it comes to COVID, it's going to be a good month here yet before we reach the peak. So we'll see what happens.
Well, I guess the experience here is that if you test, and then keep the tested positive people isolated, and then test their colleagues and their workplaces and disinfect, then you get here in China. I mean, it seems to be the pattern is about a month if you
right.
Yeah, if you're testing effectively and efficient and enough, then it takes about a month to get. We've been a week of 1% new infections every day, and that's it is under control here, right?
That's better.
Yeah.
So
I don't know.
What do you think of this? I don't know if we have time for this, but what do you think of the whole thing with China talking about that now they're getting infections from people coming back to China from people returning to the country? How's that going to play?
Korea's concerned about that very same thing as well. Yeah, no, that's the concern now here as well in Korea, that we don't want to. We've basically got it under control here. The last thing we want is a thing coming back,
Yep.
Because it's under control and we know where it is.
Yeah.
It comes back and then it's dispersed yeah. So
yeah.
You need to test everyone and let the healthy people back to work and keep the sick people home for 2 weeks before that.
Yeah.
We can't shut economies down for months on end. That won't work, right?
What do you think of this in the States, where they have these people like Rand Paul and famous actors and stuff getting tested with no symptoms? They had no symptoms, and they're like, oh, they've been tested for COVID. They're asymptomatic. Da 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 da. It's like, why are you guys getting tests?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
It speaks again to the idea of, inequality of access to even basic stuff like tests for a pandemic is unequal. Has it ever been equal though?
No. So
that perfect equality is not an achievable objective, but it's not. I think it's kind of worth aiming for
a level of equity. I would say, yeah, some kind of level of equity. Yes, yeah, like a baseline, I guess you could say.
Yeah, a safety net through which you cannot fall, sort of thing.
Yes, yeah,
I'm all about that.
Anyway, hey, it's been good talking.
You too, man.
We'll stay on each other's radar over the next week and see where this goes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right on.
Rock on.